Ladies, gentlemen, and all variations thereupon, the Empire has landed. There's no way we're going to be able to take on the whole Empire with little pea shoots like this. So we're going to have to go undercover. We're going to have to infiltrate, gather intelligence, resist from the inside. That's how the rebellion's going to win this thing. So we're going to need some sort of disguise, something that's going to make us blend in, something that's going to hide us. And yet, we still need a way to communicate with each other, a way to subtly show our allegiance so that we know who our contacts are. I think I've got an idea of what we can do. A skirt with hidden rebellion pockets. Let me show you what I mean.
I drafted the pattern pieces for this beforehand, so all I have left to do now is to pin them onto the fabric that I'm going to use. The fabric is a brown linen for the outside layer, and I'm going to use a black linen for the inside layers. Now, the reason I'm using linen is A, because it's very light and breathable, and B, because I think it fits best with the Star Wars aesthetic, the texture that you get from the woven threads. I'm going to use this scrap piece of fabric in order to make the waistband, and because it's scrap pieces of fabric, it's not even. So in order to make sure that it's all even to the right size, what I'm going to do is fold it up into a smaller section and then just cut down the uneven sides, so when I unfold it, it's all perfectly even. And then obviously I need to measure it against myself in order to get it to the right length. As always, whenever you lay out a flat piece of material, you must lie on it, as per the prophecy.
After cutting everything out, it's always a good idea to have everything pinned together so you can see how it's going to form. And that will allow you to notice some things. Primarily, you'll probably notice all the bits you want to change and bits that you've probably done a bit wrong. In this, for example, I've put the rear layer, I hold it up, so that it's rather wide at the base. So you can't actually see that I've got 2 layers there when this folds back. The idea of having it as 3 layers was because I wanted this to be as 2 separate parts. If there was a strong gust of wind, it would display everything. So I wanted to have a 3rd layer underneath, and I wanted to have it so that it sat so you could see that there was another 2 layers there. Unfortunately, because that bit's so wide, you can't see that there's another bit there, so it's just going to create a lot of extra bulk. So what I thought instead is, rather than trying to adjust that and try and create it so that it's got the effect of having the 2 pieces of fabric that are clearly there and overlapping, which is what I originally intended, I'm just going to use this top layer and remove the bottom one, and I'm going to use that fabric to make the pockets so it's not going to waste. So I'm going to attach this layer to a separate waistband, so it's going to have a main waistband that everyone will see and a hidden waistband behind, so that if there is a strong gust of wind, this isn't liable to be blown up, basically. The front layer I've pinned the hem, and I haven't pinned this one yet, so this is actually going to sit a little bit further back than it will do, so you'll see an extra little slip of fabric through the middle there, and yet these black layers will be hidden behind the brown. So that's how I want it to sit. When I pinned it all together, I noticed something, a little bit of a brainwave, something I didn't originally have in my design, which is why it's always a good idea to pin things to your dress form. I realised if I put a hook on the edge of the fabric around about here, this panel of the skirt, and an eye up here, I could pin the skirt back and expose the pockets if I want to. If it's a particularly hot day and I don't want so many layers. It's Britain, so probably I will want all 3 layers, but it's an option that I could have. So I think I'm probably going to go with that. I have plenty of hooks and eyes, so I'll give it a go. The real reason I wanted this pinned up is so that I can plan the pockets. So the pockets on this are going to be window pockets that are going to sit on this middle layer, so they'll be hidden, so you won't be able to see the hidden rebel symbol most of the time. And I stand up, my head's going to go out the shot, but basically this dress form is set to about the same height as I am. There might be a centimetre or two difference, but it'll give me a good idea of how far I can reach down on it and where to put the pocket so that I can get my hand in without bending. So all I'm going to do is stand up against it, place my hand roughly side at once, and I know that that is the lowest point I can reach down, so I don't want my pocket to go any lower than that. You probably don't see the mark on YouTube, but now I also want the pocket's weight to be taken up by the waistband. So I need to know how far from the waistband to the opening of the pocket I'm going to want to go. So again, putting my hand down and see that's the lowest point. So if imagine having a phone in or something, I don't want it to stick out the top. So if I say about there, will be the bottom of the opening, and then once I've drawn the symbol on the front there, then I'll be able to tell from the waistband to the top and measure out the entire pocket. You'll see me do that in a second, so don't worry if you don't follow along just yet. But that's my measurement. So there's the bottom of the opening of the pocket, that will be the bottom of the rebel symbol, and that will be the lowest extent of the pocket. So quite roomy, enough space I can get my hand in and open it out. And actually, let's also mark on the width. So that will be the extent of the pocket, so I can get my hand in, open my fingers and wiggle them around. Nice roomy pockets, and one of these tiny mass-produced pockets I can just let my fingers in. Proper pockets.
Now that we've marked on where the pocket goes, we're going to need to transfer it across to the material that we're going to actually make the pocket from. Now, I've already made a detailed video on creating these sorts of window pockets, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. The link to the video will be in the top corner, and you can follow that if you really want to make one of these for yourself. I'm just going to go through the differences in this one from my previous build. So obviously we need to take the weight up at the waist for the pocket. So we've lined up this piece of material with the top, so I know the top of this is going to match the waistband of the actual skirt. And now I'm going to transfer across the dimensions of this onto here. Start by just using a ruler and marking on. So that's the size of the pocket, so I'm going to fold that across so that the rear layout is also covering the same sort of area. And I'm going to neaten this up for the size of the pocket that I want. So this is going to be the top of the opening, and I'm going to use something round to create the bottom of the symbol. So hand could go in there, and we'll have that space. Might make it a little bit wider, and we've got this space down here which is actually going to store the materials. So let's join these bits up so that I've got an outside edge, and we're going to put seam allowance on the outside of that as well. And then we just need to go to a narrower point at the top, which is going to be a straight slope up. I'm just going to eyeball this. Don't need to be too accurate. I'm going to make these slightly wider. So make sure I've got enough room. And then what we want to do is transfer on a symbol of the rebellion. This is actually called the star bird, with two wings coming up and what will be the head. So this bit is going to be cut out so that we can see through to the backing material, which will be red. So we'll have a red and black pocket. Now without this detail, I'm going to actually have to sew the skirt and the backing material together, because having all these narrow points is going to cause the fabric to flop and fold and everything. So I'm going to have to stitch all this top part down, and it's going to be easiest to do that by hand, but this bottom curve and a lot of the outside around here can be done by machine. So I'm just going to mark on where I want this to go, and that's going to be the drawn onto there and make the opening for the pocket. There we are, that's the rough outline of the symbol. Now don't worry too much if you get it wrong, because just tailor's chalk can just wipe it off. Now that we've got these folded together, what I'm going to do is cut out the outside, and I'm going to use these two pieces as the front of the pocket, so these will need to be cut out as well. So to make sure that it all holds together and I'm getting it all exactly the same size, because I want it symmetrical, I'm going to pin these two parts together before I do the cut, just to stop it wobbling around. Now, as this is going to be the front parts that are going to have the pocket holes in, before I unpin them, I'm going to cut out the starboard so that we've got symmetrical pockets on each side. Otherwise I'd have to do it twice, and there's a good chance I'd make it slightly different on each. So let's begin by just folding it and cut. I'm using my small scissors here so I can get into the details. As these are going to be the back pieces to the pocket, I'm going to mark on the area which is going to be covered by the red silk. Now for the actual visual of the red and the pockets, I'm going to use this red silk. Now the silk itself is probably not going to be that good a material for using for creating the whole pocket, just because of the way these have been working together, and it will probably shed a lot and liable to get caught and snagged on things. So I'm going to create small squares of this are going to be sewn onto the linen that's actually going to make the pocket. So we'll only actually have a small piece of silk exposed, which dramatically cuts down the cost because it's in the size of the material for the pockets, and I don't really want to make a whole pocket out of silk when the majority of it's not going to be seen. So what we're going to do is come to the end, cut out, I think using prinking shears just to minimise shedding, squares that are wide enough to fit over the section of the pocket that we're going to see. Create two of them, stitch them onto the backing, and then basically when we put the pockets together, then we'll just see this bright red through the black. So what I've done here is I've pinned the pocket that we've cut out the rebellion symbol on to the panel of the skirt that's going to house the pocket, which means now I need to cut out an identical section for the pocket opening in the skirt, and then we're going to sew on around the outside of here using the machine with just an ordinary straight stitch, just to give it an anchor point so we can do the turn going through. And this bit around here with all the details, that is going to have to be done by hand. So as you can see now that I've turned it, the curve actually sits on the seam, so we've got a little bit of rough edge that sticks through there, but these are all still raw because they haven't been sewn yet. What I'm going to do is, I've been thinking about this quite a bit to try and think of the best way to do this. So what I'm going to do first is attach the other side, and then we're just going to slightly roll the edge of these two parts together to try and maintain the shape as much as we can, and then from the other side top stitch through. So this is stitched all the way through to the other side of the pocket so that everything up this side would be inaccessible because this would all be stitched down. This would be the only part of the pocket that can actually be used down the bottom here. Now that the pocket opening is sewn in place, we need to sew the panels of the pocket together. Now the way I'm going to sew these together for the seam is I'm going to put all 3 layers into one seam allowance. And the reason I'm doing 3, even though there is another piece that's got to go underneath, is I'm trying to keep it simple, to keep it straight in my head. I'm going to put the final black piece on one of the sides afterwards once I've sewn all these together by attaching it to the seam, but I'm only doing the 3 right now because I know if I try and do the 4 at some point I'm going to mess something up and have to redo it. So if I keep both sides symmetrical for now, it's just easier to keep straight in my head. I'm not going to sew the back piece to the wrong side or sew something upside down. So all I'm going to do is pin all 3 together and then sew the seam along the inside there, so all of these 3 will stay together along there. Might have to move that black one across a bit. When we come to the waistband, what we want to do is pin it so it's right sides together. This fabric doesn't really have right sides, but if your fabric does, make sure it's right sides together. And we're going to stitch down the side there, but not all the way to the bottom. Taking away the seam allowance at the bottom, we want to sew down to about there, and then we'll turn it inside out to hide that seam and this selvage edge. Now before we go any further, we need to do everybody's favourite part, press the seams and sew the hems. So let's go into the montage. Now that the seams are pressed and the hems are sewn, we can attach the waistband. Now that I've sewn the waistband on and I've got this extra section that's going to be the wraparound that acts as the belt that holds it in place, it's actually asymmetrical now because it overlaps this side but not the other, which makes it a lot easier for me to work out exactly where to attach this final panel. Now I'm really low on black thread, so I'm going to be using the brown for this, but it won't matter because we won't really see it. And the way we're going to sew this in is we're going to attach it to that little bit of seam allowance we've got there, but we're going to leave a gap at the top enough that I could fold it over slightly like that, because we're going to attach this ribbon across the top to act as a second waistband, so that I can use this to attach to the underside, keep this separate, so that as strong gust of wind comes along it doesn't blow all the skirt open, it's got a separate section closed. So that's what we're going to do now. All we've got to do is pin this in place, pin the extra waistband on, and then it's a matter of finding a place for attachments. So let's get on to that. We're just going to attach this last bit of ribbon by hand because the sewing machine will put the thread through right the way to the other side. So all we're going to do is catch a few threads from the waistband of the main skirt, push it through the ribbon, and just do a whip stitch, I believe it's called. Because this needs to be fairly well secured, because this is going to be a stress point, I'm going to go back down and just use up all the last of the thread. Not the neatest, but strong. Right, so you're not getting the whole body shot because obviously I'm not wearing a top. But this is the fit that I'm trying on just before I make the closures. I want to make the closures in the correct places, so I've got to try it against my body to see where the closures are going to be. Now, when you're creating a waistband closure like this, which is essentially a belt, what you want is 2 points of contact, either vertically or horizontally, but you've got to have 2 points to prevent a twist in the belt. I'm going to put the double closures horizontally, I think, and there's the other ribbon hidden underneath that goes around on the inside, so we'll have 2 closures on the inside, 2 closures on the outside. So to mark on where the closures are going to be, I'm going to use something called tailor's tacks, which I'll show in a moment. And the way you would do it is you get a needle and thread with a visible thread, like something like a red or a white or something against this, and you go through where you want the closure to be. So you go through the outer waistband, the brown bit, and then through the inner one, but not this blue. So you go in and back out again. Then as you pull them apart, you'll end up with a loop of thread that goes from the front layer and the back layer. Cut it in between the two and end up with 2 pieces of thread, and that will mark on where you want the closures, so that you know when you've sewn the closures together, so long as you sew on where those threads have come through, you'll be able to close on the exact same spot. And it's got an advantage over using something like chalk or a fabric marker, in that it's not going to rub off whilst you're trying things on and moving things around, which is especially useful in this situation because I've got an extra ribbon underneath which I'm going to have to do the same thing for. So if I use chalk, it'll probably rub off this while I'm trying to do that one.
Now I just attach on the hook and eye closures wherever the tailor's tacks have come through, and I know they're in the right place.
And there we have it. A Star Wars Rebel skirt. From the outside, looks like a regular skirt, but flip back the pocket and we reveal the Starbird. This was quite a fun project. I learnt a lot in my drafting process and fitting it and making it all work. And I quite like how it's turned out. I did actually finish this just in time for May the 4th, but it's going to be a while before I finish editing the video because I've just realised that I want to have a prop for it, so at least for the thumbnail, probably for the dramatic shots that you'll see once I've finished talking. So a couple of things about it is, firstly, this section can tend to try and hook itself on the inside of the skirt there and open up a little bit. So I'll put an extra hook and eye on the inside so that it stays closed as I walk. I might make it a more permanent thing because the hook's quite low down, so I can get the skirt on and off if it was a permanent fixture. With the hooks and eyes at the side, I can easily pin it open to reveal the skirt underneath with its pockets. I can do that on both sides. So I can get my hands all the way down the pockets if I just stretch very slightly, but most of the time if I reach down I can get my fingers in, so if I have something in there like my phone, it sits just on the inside and I can just dip it in and out without having to slouch at all. So there's your Star Wars skirt. If you were doing a Rebel Spy cosplay, I think that would work rather nicely. And if you just wanted to wear it around it on the outside and you didn't want to look like you're a Star Wars cosplayer, just put the flaps back down and no one need know. The Empire's not going to know what hit it. So let's give you some close-up shots.